Today is the opening day for the live action remake of How to Train Your Dragon or a Dragon. Oh, How to Train Your Dragon. And I really enjoyed watching the movie when it was animated, so I was very excited to hit the theaters to watch the live action remake. And this is my review of the movie. And if you watch, so the original movie's been out for a pretty long time, so I don't think it's that spoilery to talk about the ending and the important points. Especially because this movie is practically like a shot for shot remake of the animation. But I think this was such a good movie. Uh I mean, it was really worth the ticket um price, because movies are expensive these days. And many unfortunately sometimes I go to the movies and I'm like, oh, that I could have not, I could have just watched something at home. But this was a new wild experience to have at a cinema, especially because they do in the original too, they do such a good job at portraying something overwhelming, right? Um, in the scene where all the dragons are flying together towards the nest, and you get to see like, holy crap, this isn't just like it's like a flock of birds, but it's like a flock of dragons instead, right? And that scale of the scene is just really awe-inspiring. And I thought that as I was watching the original movie on the TV, but now looking at it on the big screen was like, holy crap, that's amazing. And when the queen dragon emerges, right, you can really see just how grand this dragon is. And it's like, holy crap, it's they did such a great job at portraying that sense of overwhelming scale, and I really loved it. Acting wise, it was really great, especially the hiccup. I could really see how the character gets more and more determination as the movie progressed. But I think really what really shines about this movie isn't really like the live action remake portion of it, but it's the original story of it, right? The original story of this whole franchise is just so good. And there are some Buddhist talking points about this movie. Um, and I think it's important to mention those, especially in this day and age where there's not a lot of peace going around. So the thing is, when we are blinded by our rage, we fall into what we call like a false dichotomy, false dilemma. We only see two options based on how our mind is warped. So, in this kind of a mentality, a third option sounds crazy and non-existent. Throughout the whole movie, right? The father wants to either conquer the dragons or die trying. And this is something that he just cannot understand. It's like, peace with dragons? Coexistence with dragons? Are you high? What are you smoking? So when you're in this dichotomy, there's no way a third option can exist. But real life always is more rich. It's richer than two false choices, right? So from Hiccup's perspective, it makes sense to be at peace with the dragons, especially because they don't have this internal, intrinsic motivation to hunt humans down. It's a choice that they unwillingly make because they want to escape their fate of being consumed by the queen dragon, right? So, that idea of how consuming a viewpoint can be, and it tunnel visions in you into making very wrong decisions. But throughout the movie, there's a pivot point. And what's that pivot point? That pivot point is when it becomes about them, right? So father is like all stern. No, dragons need to be caged, and we're either gonna take advantage of it or we're gonna conquer it, and blah blah blah. But as soon as Hiccup shows up, and it seems like Hiccup is in danger, right? The father is like, "Oh my god, that's my son!" And as he dives into the water to save both Toothless and Hiccup, now he sees, holy crap, this is just like, I see your viewpoint now. So until that point, all this peace and coexistence talk, it's like it has nothing to do with me. But when it becomes about me, that's when I can look at it from a different perspective. And as humans, we like to criticize this, right? But the thing is, this is how the human mind generally works. So why was Hiccup the first one to see that, dragons, I mean, like, how did he break out of the dichotomy of I need to conquer them or die trying? It's because he says in the movie too, right? I thought that Toothless was just as scared, as frightened I was. So at that moment, when they exchanged, glances, Toothless and Hiccup both understood, oh, this guy's just like me. They're a separate entity, but they are just like me. And that is when empathy can truly shine, and we can break free from this spell of a false dichotomy and consumed mind and come to a different kind of a resolution, right? And that's exactly what the Buddhist middle way is about. So that was such a wonderful representation of how the middle way works out in real life. And I thought that was a wonderful thing to behold. And also, um, the movie talks a lot about killing dragons, right? In the dialogue, there's a lot of, violent talks about it. But something I really appreciated was the fact that, so I became a vegetarian recently. And I have since then, I have become kind of really sensitive to all the violence that we see on popular media, right? So I think what's so wonderful about this movie is also there is some violence, right? But it doesn't go overboard. It just shows you the necessary violence required to motivate the conflict. And it doesn't show you on screen like the dragons being beheaded and then their heads sticking on a stick and then celebrating. And the only real life violence is when the dragons eat the fish, but then they gotta eat something, right? Because they're carnivores, and so that was a little bit more understandable. And even the final battle with the queen is like it's less about Toothless actually killing another life, but it's more like tricking them into basically setting them up for their own demise driven by their own greed. Which is, again, another very Buddhist kind of a theme, right? A lot of greed will naturally lead to suffering, sometimes even your own demise. And the ending, right, is like Hiccup loses a foot too. And again, it mirrors this idea that whatever, as long as we can see eye to eye on something, right? As long as we can see that we are different entities, but we can experience something in the same way. So if I hurt you, just because I can imagine myself getting hurt, I don't want that to happen to me. So that must mean you don't want it to I don't want that to happen to you because I could easily put myself in your position. But that, I think, is something that we are failing to recognize every day in this violent world, right? In this world driven by conflict and needless killings. And these decisions to kill are made by the people who never even have to walk out onto the battlefield, right? And it's all wasting lives. And in these times, I think this was such a wonderful movie to witness, not just for the message, but it's just great entertainment. And I heard, I mean, just watching it at the regular cinema was great, but I heard this has all the like 3D, for IMAX, 4DX. I heard it had all these great versions of it. So I would highly recommend giving How to Train Your Dragon live action remake a watch. Very great movie.